If you ask me what my favorite film is, I will immediately answer Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, a 1971 film directed by Mel Stuart and produced by David L. Wolper. This is my #1 favorite film, but I want to put one thing in the forefront right now. Favoritism and critique are very different. I may really like a piece of media, but critically I would have at least a couple of negative things to say about it. There are also movies specifically that I absolutely love to the point of them being my personal favorites, but I can and will point out negatives. And Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is one of these movies. It may be my most favorite film, but from a critical standpoint, I don't think it's the best movie ever. I have a lot of positives, but then you get to this film's problem. Its big problem. Now look, this video is going to be more than me just taking a dump all over an otherwise awesome film. I love this film, but no film is without its problems. And I do have to say, this film has one flaw. One that I doubt anyone other than me has brought to the forefront. No, really, this criticism is going to redefine this movie's existence. I'm gonna drop a truth bomb on this movie. This movie's biggest issue is that it's supposed to be an adaptation of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. As a film, by itself, it's great. It has a ton of memorable moments, tons of great musical numbers, Gene Wilder's performance is nothing short of incredible, and the entire film has the strange, comforting liminal space vibe that I just absolutely love. Everything about this film is great, but then you get to that problem. And it's honestly minor in the grand scheme of things, but when you seriously start to consider it, it becomes very glaring. This is the fact that this film is supposed to be an adaptation of the original novel it's based on, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And it tries doing this, but it falls flat on its face. It's nothing that reaches offensively bad territory like what they did with the 2005 adaptation, but it's still just, oh my goodness. The first sign of dubiousness comes with the film's title. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory instead of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, there are valid reasons as to why this change was made. David L. Wolper was one of the film's producers. He wanted to make the film stand out, and adding the Wonka name would make the film more recognizable and individual. Willy Wonka is a much more recognizable name than just Charlie. That and Wonka is a major character from the story, so it makes sense that you'd want to rename the film for the sake of recognizability. But then you get to the part that Charlie himself was supposed to be the book's main focus. He's the character who the book mainly revolves around, and he's seen most throughout it. He is the one who is chosen to explore Wonka's factory. Most of the narrative in this book is centered around Charlie. The book is literally called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, this may or may not be considered a red flag, but the film itself could still be an effective adaptation. I mean, I think we already know the answer to that, right? Let's start with some background about this film. You want to know the major catalyst that brought this film into existence? Mel Stuart's daughter had read the original book and she wanted her dad and David L. Wolper to make a film out of it. That's it. That is automatically a plus for me. This film exists just because the dad wanted to make his daughter's dreams come true. But what about after this? This was during the early 70s and Roald Dahl, the book's author, was still alive. How much of an influence did Dahl have on the production? Well, the answer to that question is no. That's it, just no. During early production, Dahl gave a kind of but not really screenplay for everyone to work with, just an outline of the book. And Dahl later left altogether due to creative differences. So Dahl was barely in the production of this film. Okay, no need to sound the alarms yet. So maybe this film turns out to be awesome in the wake of all of this. And it does, the film by itself, but let's consider this film as an adaptation of a book, where the author of said book arguably barely gave a crap during the production of what was at the time the film adaptation of his magnum opus, the film that Dahl would later grow on to hate with a passion. Oh sweet Neptune, what have I gotten myself into? Okay, let's look at the actual film. Maybe despite how much this film was put through the ringer during its early development, maybe it'll turn out to be a great adaptation of the book that it's standing on. Does it? In the book, we start with a profile of the Bucket family, a dirt-poor family whose youngster, Charlie Bucket, is the main focus. In the 1971 film, we start with the guy from the candy store, and we get a song? I mean, don't get me wrong, The Handyman is a really nice song, but we don't see Charlie until the end of it. He's outside the window being all sad because he can't partake in the merriment. I mean, the book details how Charlie has to deal with kids in the candy store and at the school playground eating candy that he wasn't able to have, so does this film start at one of those instances, completely ignoring the beginning where it establishes the Bucket family? Is this like the Outsiders movie where they just sort of skip the beginning part of it? Wow. we're just starting with this film and my head is spinning. I mean, they're singing about Willy Wonka, and this is Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, so from that perspective it makes sense that Wonka would be stressed at the beginning and not Charlie. Also, we see that Charlie Bucket has a job as a paperboy. It's something that was never seen or even alluded to in the book. However, Charlie Bucket's family is dirt poor, and the book uses heavy language that emphasizes just how tiny and unfurnished Minecrafter hut that you made with your bare hands levels of poor this family is. So it makes sense that Charlie would get a kitty job to try and provide for his family. And another thing, while his dad was alive in the book and working a deadbeat job, he's straight up dead in the 1971 film, like literally dead, and at no point does he have any direct involvement in the film. Why did they this? I have not the slightest clue, but in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of minor. In the book, Mr. Bucket is forced to leave work because the toothpaste company he worked for went under, leaving the family even deeper into poverty. In the 1971 film, we're at the later point already, and as for him being dead, honestly, you could have fooled me considering how Mr. Bucket barely does anything after the aforementioned point in the book. As for film, Charlie's dad being completely absent, it again emphasizes the fact that this family is desperate for money. So again, it makes sense that Charlie has a job. Oh, and his mom has a job washing clothes, while she gets paid peanuts. So the mom is essentially a replacement for Charlie's dad. I actually kind of feel sorry about that "you could have fooled me" comment earlier. For some reason, Warner Brothers just has this weird disdain towards Mr. Bucket. There's this film, and during the development of the 2005 movie, they wanted to not have Mr. Bucket in it at all. Why so much resentment towards this guy? Like, seriously. We see Charlie walking by Wonka's factory, where there's this insane Tinkerman with a bunch of knives, and he's rambling about little people. Yeah, because Grandpa Joe's exposition about said little people near the beginning of the book surely wasn't enough. We gotta add drama to it. And then we get to see the inside of the Bucket household. And I'll give them credit. They got the whole little "they've been in bed for 20 years" tidbit correct. Also, there's a mention of Charlie's mom smoking tobacco, which wasn't ever mentioned in the book. Why was that a detail that was added? And speaking of which, Charlie brought some bread with his paperboy money. Alright then, we get some of that sweet, savory exposition on Wonka and his factory. Only bad thing is that it barely even exists. Grandpa Joe literally only gives like a paragraph and a half worth of exposition. There is no mention of stuff like the never melt ice cream or bluebird eggs or the giant bubble blowing taffy or the Indian prince. Oh, you know that one story about an egotistical Indian prince who wanted Wonka to build him an entire palace out of nothing but chocolate, but karma later comes back to bite him when a hot day melts his chocolate palace. Absolutely no mention of him anywhere. What happened to like all four of the grandparents spending entire chapters worth of time giving a bunch of awe-inspiring and totally tubular exposition on Wonka, which is supposed to make the audience excited about Wonka? Why? Anyway, next thing we hear about the golden ticket contest on the TV and not through Mr. Bucket reading it through the newspaper. The first kid who wins is a German foodie named Augustus Gloop. Why is he German? I mean, he was never mentioned to be German in the book. It doesn't bother me per se. I actually kind of like the change because it makes Augustus stand out a little bit more as a character, but there was no mention of him being German in the book. I mean, why? Also, in between the interviews and the little bits of Charlie, we see a bunch of chaos caused by the whole golden ticket conundrum. We also get some of this in the book, but it's emphasized a lot more here. I can see why they put this in the film. There are 5 highly valuable rites of passage that are inside of packs of candy, made by the world's greatest candy maker. You don't think something like that would cause some major chaos? Cut a little bit to Charlie getting a scarf for his birthday. Why the scarf? Oh, and Charlie gets a chocolate bar once a year for his birthday. But sadly this year he doesn't get a golden ticket. There's at least one thing from the book. Veruca Salt's turn. Her role is largely unchanged from the book, albeit this rendition just takes place in real time instead of her being interviewed, instead of there being like this huge news crew documenting it. And there is no her standing on top of a piano, sadly. Hey, remember in the book about that one machine that dude made, where it had a golden sensor and he put it inside a convenience store and it straight up assaults an old woman because she had a golden tooth? Yeah, well, instead of that, the 1971 film has a machine that is a probability calculator, and apparently the thing is sentient based off of the snarky remarks it makes in response when it's asked where the golden tickets might be. We then cut to Violet Beauregard's little news interview, where her dad is an egoist car salesman and her daughter is also being a jerk, and she doesn't mention how she likes to terrorize public transportation with her gum-chewing antics. which she mentioned in the friggin' book. Charlie is seen meeting up with his mom at her laundry washing place for some reason. Like, this was never in the book. What's the point? We get the Cheer Up Charlie song, and then we get to see Mike TV. There isn't much to rant and rave about here, aside from his mom seeming proud of her son's television addiction, which is concerning, considering how she never really approved of it in the book. We get to see Charlie and Grandpa Joe sneaking a chocolate bar that was spent with their tobacco money. At least they're spending it on something worthwhile. We see some wild royalty auction, and then there's this very minor side plot about some lady's husband being kidnapped for ransom, with their payment being her last crate of Wonka bars. And then we see that this guy, who was located in Paraguay, had gotten his ransom and he got the 5th golden ticket. Except not really. We get some more alienated school antics, and then after this, we get to the point where Charlie finds some money in a storm drain, and then he finds the actual 5th golden ticket, and immediately after learns that the aforementioned 5th golden ticket was a fake, even though in the book it was a woman from Russia who faked her 2nd golden ticket. And while Charlie is watching him, Slugworth who? Why Slugworth? He was seen coming up to the other 4 kids in their interviews earlier, and now he comes up to Charlie and tells him that he can make him rich if he gets Wonka's recipe for an everlasting gobstopper. What? Okay, what? Why? This dude was never a legitimate threat in the book. Why is he this huge villainous figure in the movie? I don't. When Charlie runs home, he shows his family the golden ticket, and we get Grandpa Joe suddenly getting up out of bed. Yes, this was made a huge deal in the book, but trust me, this isn't the last of Grandpa Joe's villainy that we'll be discussing. He then sings a song about himself, despite Charlie being the one who found the golden ticket. Oh my gosh. Cut to the day of the tour, and Mike TV does the whole "I'm on TV, hi random people" thing. And then we finally see him. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Willy Wonka! Huh, that's not what I was expecting. The original book Wonka was the short old dude with a black top hat, a plum tailcoat, bottle green trousers, a gold-tipped cane, and he also had a black pointed goatee. This version of Wonka has a purple coat, a colorful undershirt thing, beige dress pants, fluffy orange hair, and a dark orange top hat. Now this design I actually really like. It's able to give a fresh take on the character while also being able to preserve the happy old guy feel of the original book Wonka. Does it deviate a lot from the book version? Yes, but it mostly preserves the feel of book Wonka, which is one of the most important parts about it. Also, Mr. Wonka in this film walks out with a limp, but oh no, it's just a prank, he's actually very nimble. Good to know they kept book Wonka's dancer squirrely side, but he really didn't do the whole fake out thing in the book. Anyway, he greets the 5 kids and hey, he didn't make fun of Veruca's name. They all go into the entrance, I think, and on the walls they have sticky hands. Why do they have sentient sticky hands? I don't get it. Oh, and Mr. Wonka has them sign a contract. The longest contract in corporate history. Oh no. After some weird magic moving room thing, which again was not in the book, they then go through the narrowing tunnel. Although in the book it's more like a rabbit hole that's all light pink in color and it's very warm. In the film it's like some weird liminal space tunnel thing. Also that means that none of Wonka's factory is underground like it is in the book. And Mr. 1971 Wonka unlocks the chocolate room door with song instead of some nondescript key like in the book. And now, we get to see one of the most famous things to come from the Wonka name, the chocolate room. In the book, the chocolate room is described as this mystical valley with meadows and a chocolate river and a chocolate waterfall to go along with it. There were also weeping willows and alder trees and bushes with buttercups. In the film, we get mostly the same thing. I mean, it's not so much of a valley as it is this small inlet of land. And in the book, it's implied that there's more land beyond the waterfall since it's detailed that the waterfall occurs halfway along the river. But here, it's like coming out of a rock facing the wall. Also, most of the illustrations in the book, especially in earlier publications, we see that the chocolate room has what appears to be an open sky above it. In the film, though, it's just enclosed in this bright brick room with windows. Also, Willy Wonka sings Pure Imagination, aka the best song in the entire movie, but wait, he didn't sing that in the book. The song slaps, who cares? But first, let's get to the other major elephant in the room, the Oompa Loompas. In the book, the Oompa Loompas are described as little pale pixie people with long blonde hair and they're wearing loincloths. In the film, they're changed to little orange munchkins with green hair. Wonka tells everyone about Loompa Land, but Mrs. TV is the one who doubts the land's existence instead of Mrs. Salt like in the book. Mr. Wonka tells them about how dangerous Loompa Land is and how he rescued them. Though in the film, there's no mention of the Oompas eating green caterpillars or how they loved chocolate. And in this film, Wonka names vermicious canids as predators in Loompa Land, despite the fact that vermicious canids appeared in Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator and were portrayed as space aliens who, who gives a crap. Now, as for Augustus Gloop being sucked up the pipe, it's largely the same as in the book, except for Wonka sarcastically calls for help in a deadpan voice instead of Mrs. Gloop being the one calling for help like she did in the book. Also, movie Wonka calls for the Oompa Loompas with his whistle instead of just snapping his fingers 3 times. And there is no Mr. Gloop trying to be a hero and remove his dress coat so he can dive in and grab his son. And Mr. Movie Wonka doesn't laugh his head off when Mrs. Gloop mentions her son being turned into fudge. Nor does Mr. Wonka diss the two and say Augustus-flavored fudge would taste terrible. After this, the Oompa Loompas sing a song about Augustus. They did this in the book too, but in the book, the Oompas used tribal drums and sang in a more tribal-like chant. In the film, the lyrics are completely different and it's... what would you even call this genre? Swedish polka? After this, Wonka speaks in French, I think. He never did that in the book. Why? Anyway, he calls for the Wonkatania, which was never named in the book. And in the book, it was this huge, fantastic pink Viking boat made out of hard candy. But in the film, it has this more typical fancy boat design. And another thing, the Oompa Loompas in the movie don't laugh at everything like they did in the book. They get on the boat and Grandpa Joe quotes his book self by saying, "Someone needs a good kick in the pants. I will deal with you later, you disgraceful human!" Also, Wonka gives out some rainbow drop candies, which were only mentioned by name in the book. As it turns out, they actually kept one of the songs from the book, Wonka's boat ride poem. However, instead of it being this epic fast boat ride, instead we get one of the most horrifying freakouts in movie history. We see many disturbing images flashed on the walls of the tunnel, instead of it being pitch black like detailed in the book. And in the film, when they stop after this, they just stop. There is no them riding in some huge pure white tunnel, they just stop in front of the inventing room. And that means there's no little moment of Wonka giving Charlie and Grandpa Joe some chocolate to drink. In the film, they just sort of teleport to the inventing room and Wonka disses Slugworth, saying Slugworth would give his false teeth to be in there for 5 minutes. Instead of in the book how Wonka said it would be Fickle Grubber giving his front teeth to be in there for 3 minutes. I'm not even gonna comment. We then see the inside of the inventor room. In the book, it's described as this huge kitchen with pots and pans and smoke and steam everywhere. There are pipes running around the room, and one of the inventions is this little machine that pops out green marble candies called Everlasting Gobstoppers. But in the film, these candies look more like rainbow sea mines. And remember that in this film, Slugworth approached the kids saying that he wanted these candies. Dude, my head is on fire. Mr. Wonka then goes to a pot and says it's too cold. And then he puts shoes into another pot and says that it gives it a kick. However, in the book, Wonka just goes to this one pot with purple goo and says it's hair toffee, and he goes into detail about the hair toffee. In the film, we see Mike TV becoming victim to exploding candies, which again were only referenced by name in the book. Wonka then shows off the meal gum making machine. Now, when she steals the meal gum in the book, Mr. Wonka gets all freaked out because she's chewing on the gum, and Mr. Wonka is all afraid of what'll happen to her. But in the film, Wonka barely cares or says anything. Violet's blueberry fiasco is mostly the same as in the book, aside from Mr. Wonka not freaking out and the Oompa Loompa song being different. After this, they go to a room where there is lickable wallpaper for nurseries. Again, something that was only mentioned in the book. And they leave out the part in the book where Wonka gets questioned about the irony of him making gum despite him hating it. In the book, they don't go and lick the wallpaper. The Snozzberry reference is there, but that's about it. And in the book, Wonka references fizzy lifting drinks, but in the movie... oh boy. Now, in the book, between Violet and Veruca, there was a lot of fluff exposition on some candies that were being made in the factory, and there was this little bit where Wonka shows everyone the square sweets that look round. However, in the 1971 film, we don't get that. Instead, we actually get to go inside of the fizzy lifting drink room. Everyone except for Charlie and Grandpa Joe continue with the tour. With Charlie and Grandpa Joe, however... Grandpa Joe convinces Charlie to steal some of the drinks, and they go floating up. But oh no, there's an evil ceiling fan! So they figure out they have to burp their way down to safety. My goodness. After this, we get to a room where there are geese laying golden eggs, but in the book, there were squirrels shelling walnuts. Not gonna try and question it. Veruca sings her I Want It Now song, which was obviously not in the book, and she accidentally sends herself down the garbage chute, instead of the squirrels mobbing her and then dragging her to the garbage chute, and then we get another Oompa Loompa song that's different from the book. After what would be this point in the book, the remaining group goes to the Wonka Vision Room via the Great Glass Elevator. However, in the film, we get this huge Wonka-mobile that travels 2 miles per hour and sprays everyone with fire extinguisher foam. No, I'm not joking, that's the actual material they used. Oh, and they dry clean themselves with now, because why not? After this, we finally get to the Wonka Vision Room. It's mostly the same as in the book, though it's more of a dome-shaped room instead of a thin hallway like described in the book. Mike TV's fiasco plays out mostly like it did in the book, though Wonka is uncaring like usual and he doesn't diss television like he did in the book. After this, instead of Wonka being all ecstatic about Charlie being the last contestant, he just sort of wants to be alone in his office and he just brushes the two off. I wonder why. They go into Wonka's office where everything is sliced in half. That's actually a detail I like, it fits. However, when they ask Wonka about what happened with the contest, Wonka snaps at them telling them that they stole fizzy lifting drinks, and that they broke the rules, and that they lose! Good day, sirs! And then Grandpa Joe gets mad at Wonka, tells the man that he's a liar and a swindler, and that he's an inhuman monster. My next video essay is going to be on how much of a human piece of garbage you are, Grandpa Joe, because you, sir, are absolutely full! Charlie, feeling guilty, hands his gobstopper back to Wonka. And then Wonka says they've won the contest. Slugworth then comes in, but oh surprise, it's not Slugworth, it's some random weirdo named Mr. Wilkinson. Wonka congratulates Charlie on passing the test, and then they finally go to the freaking Great Glass Elevator. Wonka raves about how fast they need to go in order to break through the factory roof, just like in the book. They crash through the roof and they marvel at how little their town looks cool while they're suspended in the air. Wonka tells Charlie that he's inheriting the factory, though his reasoning isn't as specific as it is in the book. Wonka says something all sweet and sappy to Charlie, and then wait, the film ends? There's no checking up on the other kids? So they just died? Okay then. And there's no Wonka escorting the rest of the Bucket family in his glass elevator. Alright then. At least Charlie's dreams come true. Okay, so that was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, a movie of very confusing quality. As a film by itself, it's really great. The songs, first of all, are awesome, arguably the best part of the film. The set pieces for this film are also really great, especially for the time. Every major character here is very memorable in one way or another, and it does a great job at getting its moral across. But then we get to this film's biggest problem, which is probably the biggest irony about this entire film. The film, which is great by itself, is... oh my gosh. This is like the worst Charlie and the Chocolate Factory film adaptations. Like, oh my goodness gracious. Like, some of it I can understand why they did it due to technical limitations. This was the 70s. I kind of doubt they'd have the resources for real or CGI squirrels, so I can understand why they just got these chill-looking geese. And I know why Gene Wilder made alterations to the costume. Like, for example, he didn't like the idea of bright green trousers, so he wanted to make alterations to it and make them beige dress pants instead. There's also Slugworth being an actual threat, and the whole fizzy lifting drink fiasco. Now, in all seriousness, from a storytelling standpoint, I really don't mind this. In the original book, the biggest thing that could constitute as a conflict was Doll waving Charlie's family in your face while screaming, adding some tension with Slugworth and the fizzy lifting drink stuff. I will admit it adds some much needed conflict. That, and they are using in-universe material, like not just with Slugworth and the drinks, but also some other things mentioned like the rainbow drops and the exploding candies. Those were mentioned in the book, and it's pretty cool seeing them more fleshed out here. And all of it does feel in line with the colorful wackiness of the original book. But a lot of other things are just, dude, my brain, it's fried. This film deviates from the book so freaking much, and isn't adapting from the book the main point? Like, why? I mean, and that's ignoring all the super small changes that I ignored, like every single change in dialogue, which I ignored for a reason because if I did, then this video would be 7 hours long. Like, I have seen people give this movie crap reviews on Google Reviews just because of how much this movie deviates from the book, which I can see why, I can see where these people are coming from, but dude, really? This film is far better than 1 star on Google Reviews. It's a really great film, and honestly, the one thing keeping it at the top of the Wonka movie hierarchy is the fact that Wonka's Swedish cartoon is still lost media. Wait, what? What do you mean you don't know the Swedish cartoon existed? Well, not to worry, this is gonna be the next topic for the next Wonka versus film video I'm doing. It's gonna be an interesting one. In the grand scheme of things, the whole "this sucks as an adaptation" thing really isn't a huge problem. And despite how much I ranted and raved in this video, the 1971 film is really a great film. But like any great film, it does have problems. And despite how big of a deal I made about it, the deviations from the book really don't offend me that much. And this film as a whole really doesn't offend me at all. Credit where it's due. As a whole, this book is leaps and bounds better than the 2005 film. The 2005 film is technically a better adaptation of the book, but as a whole, it's just a lot worse. And no, it's not because Johnny Depp. He's one of my favorite actors, and I think he's a great human being all around, but the 2005 film being bad really has nothing to do with Johnny Depp himself. But honestly, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory 2005 is just a giant freaking cluster truck. At least the deviations and different things they did in the 1971 film feel in line with the wacky and random Roald Dahl universe, especially with the original book. They feel like things that would be in the book, maybe like some alternate universe version of the book. The stunts that the 2005 film pulls though are just bad. As for what they are and what I think about them, we'll just have to wait until I get to my 2005 Wonka movie review. Right now, we're pretty far away from that, but we'll get there. Oh man, we'll get there. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory may be a sloppy adaptation of the book it's supposed to be representing, but in all actuality, it's the film's only real flaw and it doesn't really sour the experience that much. It's a great film, and a must-see for anyone wanting to watch a good and comforting movie.